Hello and welcome to Hong Kong Business Owners. I'm Carmen, founder of this podcast that shares inspiring stories from entrepreneurs based in Hong Kong. Whether you created your own business, thinking about doing so, or simply curious to discover business creation stories, you'll get to listen to unique business owners' journeys, to learn what it takes to start a company, what the keys to success are, how to apprehend failures and challenges, and what to keep in mind when developing your own business. As an entrepreneur, one of your main focus is to sell your products or services. That's where marketing comes into play, especially digital marketing and social media. Do you know how much time we spend every day on social media? More than 2 hours. That's an opportunity to interact with your audience, reach new customers, and get more visibility. To find out more about how to leverage social media to grow your business, check out oak.genhk.com, the agency that helps business owners find their place on social media. Now let's move on to the episode. I hope it'll inspire you and guide you in your current or future projects. And don't forget to give me 5 stars to show me your support. Dear listeners, welcome to a new episode of Hong Kong Business Owners. I'm Carmen, your loyal host and entrepreneur. Today, I'm with another entrepreneur, Sean. Hi, Sean. How are you?
Good, thanks. Yourself? Thank you for having me here on the podcast. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Happy to have this conversation with you. We are in your headquarters here in Hong Kong. Mm-hmm. And so you're the founder of Talon ESports, one of Asia's most recognized professional esports organization. Talon is an esports and gaming lifestyle platform with headquarters in Hong Kong and present in Thailand, Taiwan, the Philippines, Indonesia, and South Korea. So basically, you represent APAC teams of gamers that participate in esport championships around the world, but not only, because Talon is also a creative agency. And you started all of this business in 2017, I guess, in your apartment. And now you have office and you have 70 staff. So congrats.
Thank you.
And one thing I thought about the gaming scene here is that interestingly, Hong Kong is a good place to run a business, but it's not probably the best place for an esport business because it's not the most active market. Mm-hmm. So I'm wondering, why? Is there room for gaming and esports in Hong Kong? Is it a matter of time? Or do you feel a desire to develop Hong Kong in other industries other than, for the government to develop Hong Kong in other industries than finance, fintech, tech?
I would say historically, from when we first started this business, I think we quickly learned that like an entertainment/sports business in Hong Kong is quite hard. I think the main reason for that is just the cost of this city is not low, right? And obviously, if you look at many businesses, some of the biggest expense lines that you always have is rent, right? And that's a huge problem that you generally have for startups. And I think for an esports team, it's even harder. I'll talk about teams first, and I'll talk a little bit more about events because I think Hong Kong actually has a unique space for events. But for the team side, I would say it's quite hard here simply because the esports industry, just to start off with, is still figuring out how to move towards profitability. The business models are not perfect in a sense. And given the sort of newness of the industry, it's actually quite difficult to look at building profitability. And I think in a market like Hong Kong where the cost of living and just generally being here is not that low, to set up a new industry like esports where, the revenue streams are still being, figured out, it's actually quite hard. And so therefore, when we first started here, we quickly realized that number one, the revenue lines, which we talk about, like, for example, sponsorships from brands here in Hong Kong is actually quite limited. Not many brands are going to be forking out large amounts of sponsorship dollars, and that makes it incredibly hard. And then secondly, your expense line, whether it be staff and offices, are incredibly expensive as well. And so those two things are definitely very difficult. Thirdly, I would say that the professional player base of games or players that you can select here in Hong Kong is quite limited. Currently, we only have one professional Hong Kong player underneath the Talon roster, and he plays in Street Fighter. But previously, we did have some within League of Legends, but generally, it's a hard gig. And I would say in a city that costs so much, like if you tell your parents, hey, I'm going to a professional game, that's very high risk, I might make a little bit of money, I might make no money, that is also quite hard. And I would say also talent, like finding people who understand the industry and can build out what we've built. It's been hard as well from a HR resourcing perspective, because generally, as you mentioned, this is a finance hub, right? Like that's where majority of the talent or people come to work, and other areas, not saying creative is not as important, but it's definitely just a bit more difficult. I'll say that's from a team's perspective. From an events perspective, I actually think Hong Kong is very unique and has something that's very special. Esports, if you look at it, the fans are very international. And if I compare Hong Kong to other cities in Asia in regards to as an experience to come to, I think we have one of the best infrastructure in the world when it comes to public transport, getting around the airport. The efficiency of getting in and out is ridiculous. The fact that you can use English proficiently here with most places is not a problem. The amount of things that you can do in Hong Kong as well when it comes to restaurants and bars and clubs and hikes and beaches and shopping malls, it's very unique. And also, you can still pay cash here. You can still use a credit card, and it's relatively, you don't have any special apps here that you need to download to access, right? I think the Hong Kong government targeting more major esports events will be pretty special. I think right now the biggest issue is just we haven't had any high quality events that have done well. And then also there's probably not enough support from the government perspective to look at it. But if you look at other Asian cities, China, Singapore, Korea, Taiwan, they will have, even places like Thailand, Indonesia, are all very focused on doing this esports tourism because it's very youth orientated. I think that's a big issue that potentially could be addressed. I think Hong Kong as a travel destination is great. Afterwards, let's say you have a huge event, there's so much to do afterwards. There's probably a lack of esports infrastructure when it comes to like stadiums that could be hosted for large like scale events, 30, 40, 50,000 people. But I think that will get solved with Kai Tak once it gets built at the end of this year. And I think they should do it. And from what I've heard, they try to do a big push to try and bring in major esports events. So I think from an esports tourism perspective, that could be Hong Kong could be a unique place. So close to China, so close to so many other Asian countries. And as a travel destination, I think it's, having lived here for 12 years, I think it's a fantastic place from that perspective if I compare it to others, right? So pros and cons, but, I think at the same time, a lot of opportunities in the esports side. It's still a new industry. I don't expect it to be, straight away from day one, blow up. And I think there's going to be a lot of mistakes and things that will happen as we go along that journey. But overall, I think there's a lot of opportunities for Hong Kong, and I'm quite optimistic also with, I would say, more and more brands here in Hong Kong being interested in esports. So there's light at the end of the tunnel. I just think right now it's obviously a little bit hard simply because just the way the city is structured, it's not the most easiest for startups in general, let alone esports specifically.
Yeah, that's also why you are very active in other markets, in other countries. And for example, you have an office in Korea. That's right. And one of your objectives is more than Hong Kong is to represent APAC in what you do. Which gives even more meaning to what you do. It's you build APAC teams. It seems that you're developing more than your business. It's more about also the APAC influence in a way around the world. And I thought, does it kind of contribute to counterbalancing with the Western gaming scene? Because it's always like that. It's always it's not a war of influence, but it's just like a little fight of influence, like Western and here. So what do you think about that? And what are the leading countries in esports?
I would say for Asia Pacific, you have two big markets right now, which kind of, I guess, globally are more influential, that being South Korea and mainland China. Our mission statement to represent the best of Asia Pacific is driven by a motivation of, like as Australians, we always grow up as like this underdog mentality, right? Like no one cares, like good luck, you're never going to beat the biggest. And I think, when we first started, Hong Kong and Taiwan, let's say for our League of Legends team, has always been considered a minor region, even though they've won a world championship before. And we were like, well, the talent is there, but then maybe the mindset, the infrastructure, and the business acumen to kind of build out the right opportunities to let them shine on the global stage was a big motivation for us, because we just saw, like, why has this scene gone from world champions to barely being able to make a dent on the international stage? And if you look at just like, I use Hong Kong, Taiwan as an example for League of Legends, commercially, as I mentioned before, it's been hard. And many of the teams that were historically very successful globally here have declined significantly because of the growth of China and the growth of Korea. And if you look at Hong Kong, Taiwan players, some of the best talent, they all go to China because the salaries are significantly larger than what they are here. So, our motivation is the fact that we really like being these underdogs. And I think a lot of the Southeast Asian countries and other countries outside of China and Korea are underrepresented. And so we want to package APAC together to showcase it to the world. And also, as you mentioned, Europe and the US have some of the biggest esports teams in the world, right, when it comes to influence. And we thought it'd be a good opportunity to represent some of the smaller countries, or I wouldn't say smaller, but just smaller when it comes to esports influence, right? Some of the teams, for example, in Indonesia, like RRQ or EVOS, are one of the world's most popular teams when it comes to social media following. But because they play mainly in domestic leagues, then you won't really hear about them. Whereas the US and European teams are very global. So we felt there's an opportunity to build a global team from Asia. Of course, we're not the biggest in Korea. We're not the biggest in China, but we're kind of like, well, if we're second or third in all the markets in Asia and across multiple games, that gives us a unique opportunity. So I think it's driven a lot from the underdog mentality and being told that, if you go into that market, you're not going to achieve anything. And honestly, the teams there won't be successful. And for me, that's the motivation, right? And I think when we look at it, there's a lot of things that can be fixed within those spaces in regards to improved upon to build out those international competitiveness. And that's kind of our motivation around sort of wanting to represent multiple markets. And it was also a business decision as well, because, as I said, we were just talking about Hong Kong. It's too small to run a sustainable business just purely out of Hong Kong. So a lot of the other markets that we operate contribute significantly to us being able to have this growth, simply because it's not just tied to one market.
In Europe, what countries are very on the scene?
I would say the Western Bloc countries. So I would say like places like Spain, Germany, France. France is crazy. The UK, a lot of the Scandinavian countries as well when it comes to Counter-Strike and things like that. So it's quite broad. I would say it's pretty massive in Europe. If you look at sort of like the top tournaments there, like the LEC or Counter-Strike, League of Legends, even the Dota scene there is incredibly healthy. And some of the world's biggest teams have been born out of that region, right? France has, for example, some of the biggest teams in the world. Team Vitality is one of the biggest teams in the world and one of the most successful teams. You have Carmine Corp, which has one of the craziest fan bases around the world. And then you go to places like Spain and things like that. And Germany, you have so many of these influencer-led esports teams, which are incredibly popular. It's big in Europe, and definitely you see a lot of investment from sports clubs, football players, family offices, brands investing into it, because you've definitely seen a lot of success in Europe. Yeah.
Do you think it's only the kind of the beginning of esports? Because it's not that. I mean, it's not decade. It has a few decades, but not. It's not super compared to other industries. It's quite new. So what do you foresee? How do you think it'll evolve? Because what I'm saying is that for some people who are not at all interested in gaming, for them it's like, what? You earn your living by playing video games? What is that?
if you're interested in esports, I will say just before I sort of answer that question, I would highly recommend anyone, if you have a chance, to go watch a live esports event, particularly one that is like a global championship. And when you see the audience and
it's impressive,
and the viewership numbers, you actually realize how big it is. So it's crazy because it's not really reported on mainstream media. I think a lot of it is kind of done on sort of Twitter and their own platforms. But I think once you see it live, it's actually kind of unique. I personally think, obviously I'm a little bit biased because I'm in this industry, but I think the macro tailwinds for this industry is very undeniable. If you look at the largest entertainment sector in the world today, it is computer gaming or gaming in general, right? And when it comes to comparing it to things like movies and music and television, it's X's above all those industries. Esports is a byproduct of gaming. And I think gaming is only going to get bigger because I talk about macro tailwinds. I'm saying things like the internet's only going to get faster. The PCs and the mobile and the even the VR, AR things and all the hardware that's associated with gaming entertainment is only going to get faster, more realistic. And if you look at when I started playing games, it was like blocky 8-bit like games. But now if you look at it, some of the graphics rendering from like an Unreal Engine, you can't even almost tell the difference between real life and a game, right? That's kind of crazy. So if that only improves, I think, and if you look at also, I guess, the trend of what young people are consuming, a lot of their content and lifestyle is centered around gaming. So I generally feel in the next 5 to 10 years, this is echoed by many gaming CEOs where they feel like half of the most watched sports in the world will be some sort of computer game. Wow. But if you look at the numbers already, League of Legends, for example, like World Championships, I mean, these numbers are dwarfing some of these sports that have been around for a very long time. And I think it's because of the accessibility and then just because there's just a huge player base for these games and they love watching competitive components of it. And a lot of the publishers like Riot do a fantastic job of storytelling, of building out these narratives throughout the year, and that's driven a lot of interest. And so, I think it can only get bigger. Obviously, there are some issues right now when it comes to the various business models and sustainability and profitability, but I think, we're still relatively young industry when it comes to like where esports is when it started till now, and it's only the tip of the iceberg. So I'm quite optimistic. I think longer term, it's going to be pretty massive. Yeah. And if not, like bigger than a lot of traditional sports outside of maybe basketball and football, because I think those obviously are sports that are very like globally renowned. But you could definitely see it surpassing a lot of traditional sports and a lot of the esports clubs becoming like globally recognized brands, right? I think it's very popular.
But it's a bit like sport. I mean, sport in real life. It brings people together. I mean, esport. Like sure. Sport. Like football, let's say. Has this capacity of bringing people together, which is super powerful.
Yeah, gaming has always been about community. And I think that's where it's always been centered off. And esports has been driven off the community of people wanting to compete. And that has always been a big part of it. And I think that's amazing because, being a gamer my whole life, like what's been crazy about this gig is like I've been able to travel to so many different places and connect with so many different people from different cultures and languages and places. And the love for gaming is very similar. And, you connect on so many things that are, the frustrating parts, the good parts of gaming and all these different bits and pieces. And I think that's what makes it beautiful. And that's what I think is very optimistic as well, because these things connect people together and it's a common thing that brings people together as well. Similar, as you said, mentioned for sport. So that is basically the same as traditional sport. You have people who cheer for particular teams and you have people who hate particular teams and, that rivalry is very normal. And that definitely helps drive a lot of that interest. Yeah, for sure.
And now, back to you and Talon. You're a gamer yourself. I mean, hopefully, I hope you're a gamer yourself. Otherwise, but you're a gamer as well. So, and before that, we were just chatting. You had a career more in like finance. And so what happened? How I guess as you are a gamer, you were like, maybe that would make sense. But how did you make this career switch, which is very bold?
So I came to Hong Kong about 12 years ago for business school to also do a career switch. I was more in computer science before I came to Hong Kong. Worked at a bank doing a lot of
So you did 2 careers.
Yeah, 2 career switches. So more of like front end, back end coding. So I did a lot of that stuff. And then kind of got bored of it, came to Hong Kong and did business school. And, I guess my parents, being Asian parents, I should get into banking and finance and things like that. So I was very fortunate that I was able to get a role at Barclays in the equity
Where were you
research
before?
team.
Before Hong Kong, I mean.
Australia. I was in Melbourne.
Yeah.
So Melbourne, Australia. Then I moved to Hong Kong. And then, I was very lucky. I got a job at Barclays in the equity research team when China A-shares were like up 100% and they were building out an A-share team and they needed some people to cover that position. And so I was very fortunate. My boss, she was Australian and she says, if I'm going to work with you for 12 to 16 hours a day, at least have some talk. So that's the reason why I got hired, because I could have a good chat, I guess. That was very eye-opening. I think the hours that you work in investment banking is honestly just brutal. But you learn a lot, and I'm very grateful for the time that I had there because honestly, the speed in which you learn there is crazy. And it's been very helpful to sort of myself today in regards to numbers and how to look at a business and how to break things down and understand things quickly. Me and Jazz, my co-founder, we've always been like big gamers. And we also love traditional sport. So buying a football club is pretty much out of the question, right? That was kind of our motivation at the start. So I was reading this equity research report from Goldman Sachs, which was about esports, which was very fascinating because I was working in equity research. And I was like, it's such a random report to be talking about esports. And we read it. And I'm like, holy shit, this is really interesting because we've got an opportunity here to create a sports club in essence, but in the digital realm without needing the infrastructure of a stadium and being in a big league and getting the audiences there. And so we decided, hey, let's give it a shot. In banking, obviously, it's very hard to do side hustles. So we told my boss was like, I have no idea what you're talking about. Go do it. It's fine. And so we flew to Taiwan at that stage and pitched the team to say, hey, why don't you join us and we'll help you, pay your salaries and things like that. And basically at this stage, it was it was part-time. We're just doing it on the side in the evenings and on weekends. We just do a little bit of time if we had time to look at it. And honestly, for the first 2 years, it went nowhere until we went full-time. But I think it was just really a love of competing and a love for gaming and an alternative to the traditional sport because you obviously need a lot more money to start something like that. And that's kind of how we went down that route. I think from an entrepreneurial perspective, we've both done stuff in the past that, we enjoyed running businesses and things like that and have done some stuff even back in Melbourne where we were doing side hustles to make some extra bucks. And so, we're very fortunate that, in 2019, we were able to raise some money to do this full time. And then I guess the rest is history. So, I think it was just born out of a love to compete. And I think in banking, it sucks your soul a little bit when you're there. And it's just you're like, what am I doing? And then we also, I guess, really liked computer games and being able to do that. We grew up playing computer games. To be able to do something in the space around that was a big motivating factor. And that's kind of how I guess it all happened.
Yeah. Well, you kind of answered that already, but I was about to ask you why, because your background is more corporate. So, but you just said you had little side businesses before. Because I was about to ask you, how did you, I guess when you're an entrepreneur, you learn as you do it, as you try and as you fail and as you do it again. But usually many people have either entrepreneurs in their family or their friends or, they have this vibe and this mindset somewhere. Yeah. So what about you?
I think it's multiple bits and pieces. I think definitely from the family perspective, you hit the nail on the head. My dad is an entrepreneur. He started his own business in 20 years ago, 15, 20 years ago in mainland China. So I have a crazy story. We moved to Australia when we were quite young. My dad is a a civil engineer and an architect. He has a double degree, and he worked quite, I guess, senior in China when it comes to architecture and design for the Chinese government. They had a dream. My dad had a dream to get an education overseas, and he went to Australia, and it kind of didn't work out. And so he ended up with my mum being like laborers and manufacturing clothes. And that went on for a very long time when I was in Oz. And then I think one day, one of my dad's colleagues from university, I think he was at that stage one of the like CEOs of one of the big Chinese Hong Kong developers, came to Australia, and my dad was showing off his clothing factory. And his mate was like, "What are you doing, Jason? Like, you're one of the best architects and like civil engineers in China, and you're making like boxer shorts in Australia for like nothing, right?" And so at that stage, my dad was just like, well, he's like, come back to China. Market in real estate, this was in 2001, is booming. There's a huge opportunity. And if you can bring your expertise and skill, then, you know, there's an opportunity for you to build a great business. And so my dad went back with our family's life saving at that stage. And my mum was like, are you like effing insane? Like, we have a decent business here. We know you can pay for everything. And we're in Australia, right? Because when they first moved, you know, 1 month's salary in Australia was equivalent to like multiple years' salary in China, simply because of just the gap in economic growth. But I think in 2001, obviously China opened up, and then things grew very quickly, and a lot of these developers became, you know, some of the biggest companies in the world. So my dad was able to leverage that. He was left down to, I think, his last like $500 before he got his first project that started his company. And seeing my dad do that was, I guess, I mean, at that stage when I was young, I probably didn't understand what the hell was going on. But, you know, we talk a lot. And, you know, for me, my dad is an important part of my life and helped me a lot and mentors me a lot. And I think hearing him like go through everything and the stories, you're like, holy shit, this is pretty inspirational. But he always tells me, why the hell would you want to do this? It's honestly a horrible experience. And I would probably say the same advice for other entrepreneurs. We can talk about it a little bit later, but it is a hard experience, right? We all know this. Yes. It's like every day you just wake up and there's just problems and shit that you need to solve and fix. And it can become incredibly stressful. But he was like, don't do it, don't do it, don't do it. But, you know, even when I was working at the National Australia Bank, which was the bank previously, we found a problem with like 2 other of my graduates. So we're like, oh my God, like there is a lack of Excel capabilities, in particular like VBA, which was a coding language that we were developing. And they actually let us run our own team internally within the IT team there. And then I think that was kind of the catalyst for me. It was like, okay, cool. Like we can build businesses if we're trying to solve specific problems in a place, right? And so we've done that. I've done some nightclub businesses in the past. You know, we basically ran nightclubs in Melbourne, things here and there, which was super fun. And so that was kind of like that flair and that motivation. And I think obviously having my dad, having gone through all of that in mainland China has been really, really good as well. So yeah, I think that's kind of the motivation. It's like taking some risks, like challenges, like putting myself in situations where we're trying to solve a problem or build something aspirational. And I think, I think that's kind of how it all kicked off. I think obviously, you know, my dad doing that has been great. And even like after banking, I did join a crypto hedge fund where we looked at a lot of startups and, you know, talking to a lot of different entrepreneurs, making investments into their businesses. It's quite inspirational. So
this brought you closer to them.
Yeah, it brought us closer. And we just thought, you know, and also, you know, shout out to Marco, who's one of my MBA colleagues. I mean, he was like, the reason why we even raised money for this was like, hey, I'm doing this roadshow in the US. I think, Sean, the strategy and the vision that you have is interesting. Like, you could be able to raise some money and maybe things are doing that. So I followed him for about 2 weeks in the US while he was pitching a gold company to different investors. And then I would just chime in the last 10 minutes and talk a little bit about esports. But we're very fortunate that, you know, a couple of people who were listening were multifamily officers who invested in a lot of different things. We're like, yeah, we like this idea. You're not raising a lot. Let's give it a shot. So that's kind of how it all came together. Cool. But it's multiple pathways and pieces that I think contributed to it. And I think it's kind of, you know, put me in a position today or where we are now is the contribution of many different people and scenarios that have sort of helped us to push us where we are. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, I guess it's nice to have a kind of a role model It's to get inspired. My dad is also an entrepreneur, so I understand that. But is it me, or I'm under the impression that more and more people have different career paths now, that it's pretty common to start as a banker, end up as a baker or whatever. Or maybe have like a passion that is more than a passion, it's more than a hobby, but it's not a real job, but you still have your job. So there's many new ways of, going through life, not with just having working 20 years in the same company as our grandparents, even parents did. So then it seems to be easier now to switch, even to move from a country to another. So where do you think this come from? It's a big question, and I guess it's a loaded question, but I don't know. I thought about it. Is it because of the possibilities we have is it related to internet, social media, to technologies, or to just the fact that we realize we're worth more than just a corporate job for 30 years? I don't know.
When I was in banking, when I first switched, I really enjoyed the first 6 to 12 months because I learned a lot. And then after that, I was kind of like, shit, do I really want to do this, right? And I know banking generally, I'm not shit talking the industry. I think it's a fantastic place to learn, and obviously you can make a lot of money there. But I think what I realized is that there's a big difference between something that you enjoy doing and something that you just do, right? Because you have to pay the bills. And obviously in a city like Hong Kong, you need to have a job that pays the bills, right? And because it's not an easy city, you can't move so far out that the rent is cheap. Everything has a baseline cost here that is relatively high, and it's not easy to just, do what you want to do because you have a lot of, I guess, financial pressures generally. Working at Talon, I feel like even though there's so much crap that we have to deal with on a daily basis, but the fact that we enjoy it, it doesn't feel like work. So I think that is a big contributor to sort of us being so motivated and just continuously driving in this space, is because we have that opportunity and it doesn't feel like work, right? And I think a lot of the reason why I think people are switching is because, particularly, I'm talking a little bit about an Asian context. Our parents, they were like, do a safe job, be a doctor, be a lawyer, be an engineer, be an accountant, something that has hard a hard technical skill that can't be replaced. But I think for a lot of us, like when our parents push us towards that direction, you realize like, this is really what I want to do for the rest of my life. And then also, like, is it going to give me the fulfillment that I want, right? I think our parents' generation is probably very different in the sense that, like, my parents could just do something they hated for a very long period of time, and they had perhaps the different mindset. But I think for a lot of the generation now, it's like, let's do something that we're passionate about. And I think you're completely right in the sense that the internet and social media and all these things have led to different job opportunities. And I think it's a lot easier to start some of these companies in these new industries simply because you don't need as much resources and it's not as intensive. If you look at even this podcast, right? Like, can you imagine like back in the day, if you were a radio broadcasting company, the amount of infrastructure and hardware you'd need to do, right? But now we can set up in 10, 15 minutes, be in an office, have a great conversation and share it to millions of people, which is something that's incredibly unique, right? So I think in that sense, obviously the technology has been a big part of that. And I think also just people realizing that perhaps like, if you don't love it, can you do it for the rest of your life? And also you can be paid now for the things that you love doing, right? And I think that's very powerful. So, I think, if you take a calculated risk with these things, it's definitely very worthwhile. And I think the main thing is, at least for me, like doing this doesn't feel like a job, even though it's incredibly stressful and you deal with so much crap every day. But that's kind of, I guess, the main thing, right? It doesn't feel like a job. It doesn't matter if I need to take a call at 10:30 at night or 2 a.m. in the morning. It's like, hey, we're helping progress something that we're building that we love. And
If you're passionate, then
makes a big
then
difference.
you're ready to deal with this shit.
Yeah. And I think it's really important that you're passionate about something that you're trying to fix and solve. And it's not just, because I do also see a lot of people who love the idea of being an entrepreneur and being a founder. And I'll be honest, like,
that's not enough.
It's not enough, right? And you can see it. And it's like just the amount of crap that you need to do every day as a company that's starting up. And the numbers are stacked against you. My dad told me this when I was about to start Talon. He's like, I think it's 90% of most startups or new companies fail within the first maybe 4 or 5 years. I don't know the specific number, but it's a crazy. Your numbers are completely stacked against you. It's absolutely crazy, right? And so to be able to build something successful, you have to give those entrepreneurs credit because, like you said, it's not enough just to be an entrepreneur or a founder. You have to actually love what you do, right? Because otherwise, you can quickly see those who aren't get called out, and you get quite quickly it'll just disappear. So
in a way, I think it's not also something you decide. I mean, either you have the mindset or you don't have it. Like I was in corporate before, but I don't picture myself in corporate anymore. I mean, maybe again someday. You never say never. But some people are like, but why don't you just do something easier? Like, first, I like challenge, but also, like, I have no choice because you have no choice to be you. And being me means there's only this I can do. I mean, I know in a corporate job, I would be not fulfilled, not I don't know. I would miss something, So it's not, in a way, it's not a choice. It's just like, I'm like that.
I think it's just the way you're wired, right? And I think just different scenarios throughout your life and people around you just have put you in that position. And I agree. Like if I was working at a big bank now and let's say not in investment banking or let's say back in technology, holy crap, like, I don't like...
You would just live.
We would just live, right? And I think, I don't know, I just feel like I have a lot of friends who like want to start businesses and they want to try. And I said, even if you fail, if you love what you do and you try it, I think it's better that you have tried and failed and fallen on your ass than sat in that corporate job for 20, 30 years and then later on wondered if I tried, right? Because I think it's always, the good thing is if you started in corporate and you left and you come back, they're always going to be happy to take you back anyway, right? Because you've had the experiences which are vastly different from anyone else. And I think, if you, like I said, it's a calculated risk. And if you do the numbers and you feel like, hey, 70, 80% I have a shot, then I would always say go for it because I feel like you definitely have a lot of great memories. And if you can build something amazing, then it definitely is a good thing.
And looking at the future, what's your next big achievement at Talon and how are you going to reach it?
I think this year we have a huge expansion plans to open up a lot more new markets. Japan, India, Vietnam, Australia, Malta are some of the places that we're looking at right now. It's incredibly challenging because we haven't done many expansions because of COVID. We've been very restricted. And, although we're in many markets, we haven't been as quick. I think balancing sort of our growth and then spending and cash flows is incredibly hard. And trying to push into so many new markets in such a short period of time is also incredibly difficult. If we can get there, I think it'll be a major achievement. The revenues of our business have been, growing quite well, and being able to open these new markets will contribute to that. So, I think expanding a business from when we first started with a couple of people to now, we have 45 professional players, 30 back-end staff is incredibly difficult. And then stacking on top of that, let's say, basically not doubling, but let's say it's half of that again on top, I think is going to be a big challenge because obviously how we scale the business is very different from when we first started. So I think that's going to be quite difficult, to be honest with you. And some of those markets are quite challenging. I think that's sort of the next big step. Like our end goal is to actually have offices from Japan all the way down to Australia. I'm not talking big offices, but a presence in those markets. And to be able to pull that off, no other esports team in Asia has done that, or even close to sort of the footprint that we've built. And so our objective is to try and get that as big as we can. And I think that would be a huge milestone if we can do something like that.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah, fingers crossed.
Yeah.
Cool. And this brings us to the last question already. So you kind of actually a little bit answered that, but do you have any tips that you would like to share with other entrepreneurs or lessons you learned throughout your experience?
Yeah. Firstly, I would say, like, if you are going to go down this route, you have to be so prepared to basically sacrifice a lot of things in order to make it successful, right? Like, there's no doubt. I mean, for sure, everybody has to work hard as a startup. There's no ifs and doubts about that. But, there's going to be certain sacrifices that you need to make to kind of get there. I think work ethic for me, when I talk to my dad, when it comes to startups, has to be the number one thing, because there's a lot of things like luck and timing, which even if you work like a dog, maybe you're just doing it at the wrong time, right? Like, let's say we started this esports business 5 years ago, 10 years ago, it wouldn't have worked because the industry is not mature enough. And even if you work like a dog, you would have probably got nothing anyway, because you would have gone anyway. So I think firstly, work ethic, you have to be prepared to deal with a crazy amount of work and or a crazy amount of stress, right? Like, I think, particularly if you're the founder or the senior leadership of an esports and you start it, you have to deal with everything, cash flows, staff, all the problems of the business. And you have to be active and be there for your staff and be the leader and be calm and kind of direct people. I think that's really, really important. And I think I just want to talk about the 4 company values that we've kind of established here at Talon, which has kind of helped us where we are. So we have 4 values which are quite simple, which I think is good. I feel like has helped us be successful. Number 1, obviously work ethic. We've talked about that. Number 2, work as a team. I think it's really important to understand that as entrepreneurs that we can't do everything, and we have
This is something that it's sometimes entrepreneurs struggle with asking for help because they're like, I can do everything. I know I can do everything myself.
You can't. No. And then you're not an expert at everything, right? And like, if you look at, there's a great story here at Talon, which I love telling. I used to do all the social media here at Talon, all the Twitter and all the things like that. And then one day, one of the young social media guys booked a meeting in my calendar and presented this long presentation about sort of essentially telling me that I shouldn't do social media and that he should be doing it going forward because he was better at it. And I said, Robin, like, I don't like long meetings. What's your agenda here? It's like, I think you should stop doing it. I said, that's totally fine. I don't want to do it. You should be doing it because we hired you to do it. And if you can do a better job, I'm all for it, right? And even though, like, I don't come from any social media or marketing backgrounds, but I think that was I appreciate our staff for coming up and saying that, but I think it's really important to understand that, okay, when you're small, yes, you need to do a little bit of everything. When we first started, it was 3 staff. I was building the PCs, I was setting up the office, and we're doing all these things. But as you grow and scale, you have to understand that you have to bring in people that are good at their job, and that it's okay if they're smarter than you in that particular industry or that field, because you can't be the best at everything. It's impossible, right? If you're saying, I'm doing an esports startup and I need a lawyer and I'm going to be the lawyer for Talon as well, it's just silly to think that you can do it yourself. Right? Get help. I think get the right people around you, because, it's an age-old saying, right? I'm going to sound super generic here, but like, if you want to go fast, go by yourself. If you want to go far, go with a group of people, right? And I think it's really important that you find a group of people that have the same values as you as well, right? So I think that's really important. One of the things which I really loved is from business school and also from my NAB days is feedback is a gift, right? And I think that's really important for us as a mindset that we need to continuously grow and improve. Yeah. And as a startup, it's like you're constantly iterating on what your business model is, right? Because certain things you do might not work. You might have to pivot. You need to take feedback. And so for us, that's something we try and push to all our staff, is to say feedback is a gift. If someone cares about you enough that they want to give you some difficult feedback, of course, it has to be constructed in a way which makes sense and allows you to improve. I think that's also very, very important, right? Be able to listen to your counterparts, your own staff, your own people that are around you, your investors, your advisors, to listen to what you can improve upon and what can do better. And then lastly, I think it's something probably more from my family and my dad is like, stay humble, right? Like it doesn't matter how big you get. I mean, you've probably met some entrepreneurs and people within the tech startup space, and you're like, holy shit, like how did you, like, what are you doing or why are you acting this way, right? So I think and particularly in our industry in esports, we've always been about like, it's new industry and, you know, a lot of people get big very quickly. But our job has always been just put our head down and work and be respectful of all our stakeholders in this industry. So I think those are probably the 4 things that I think have helped me a lot. It's come from, you know, gaming, from, you know, doing work in traditional sport, working in sort of the corporate space. And I think these type of things have helped me a lot. And yeah, I just also want to say for entrepreneurs, like, try. There's no guarantee. We're obviously a very exceptional case that we've lasted this long. Who knows? We might not be around in the next couple of years. It's very possible, right? And that's a reality you face every day as a startup. And I think when we meet other entrepreneurs, if they're showing these type of values, I generally feel like, you know, hey, there's a chance that they can be successful, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Cool. All right. Thank you so much for enlightening us on esport and for your tips on entrepreneurship.
No problem. Thank you for having me.
I hope the listeners enjoyed learning from you as well. So if we want to learn more about Talon, about you, about, I don't know if you're running events or if you're participating to championships, where should we go?
Go to our website, talon.gg. A lot of the information is centered around there. We do have a Twitter account if you want to follow that, Talon _esports, I think it is. For myself, I mean, I don't think I'm that interesting, but if you want to type in Sean Zhang on LinkedIn, of course, feel free to connect. I'm always happy to chat. Yeah, I mean, Talon's probably the more bigger focus, and I think obviously there's a lot of interesting things. If you want to learn more about esports or come to these major esports events and things like that, feel free to reach out. I'm always a believer of education. I think esports is still such a new space in Hong Kong that a lot of people don't understand what it represents, and I think it's really important that you, not just myself, there's many esports experts here and around Asia, but I think it's important that you speak to the right people from the very start to understand what this represents. And I think I think there's a lot of exciting things coming down the pipeline. And I honestly think Hong Kong, there should be a lot of exciting things coming here as well from an esports perspective.
Cool. Well, I add all the links in the description of the episode. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you, listeners. Bye.
Bye.
I hope you're inspired by today's business story. And if you're thinking about running your own business, you might now be one step closer to doing so. If you own a business and you're looking to get more visibility and reach new customers, try the social media pack from Octogen, a monthly retainer to grow your business through social media marketing and optimization. Check out octogenhk.com, the agency that helps business owners find their place on social media. See you in 2 weeks to meet a new Hong Kong business owner, and don't forget to leave me 5 stars to support me and follow me on Instagram at hk.businessowners. Bye!